Would you call the roll,
I was
please?
here last.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Hayek.
Here.
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Pierce. Trustee Solomon.
Here.
Trustee Thomas.
Here.
Okay. Trustee Collins, could you give us a little summary of the Finance Committee and also talk to us a little bit about what we were looking at in terms of bond issues?
Sure.
The water situation?
Sure. On the budget, the only issue of concern, and I'm not worried about it, water sales were less than we had budgeted. It was cool. Nobody needed to water their lawn, so our revenue was a little down, but our expense was a little down too. But the fund is expected to finish the year on target. The meeting tonight began at 5:30, just ended, and I asked that this particular referendum calendar be on the board for everyone to see. We have an engineer's report on flooding issues, and we will take it up later tonight, but the board has committed that, we understand the importance of this issue, and we want to get moving on it. So we were discussing with our financial advisor the schedule to make it happen. And what you see in front of you is the calendar to get this thing on an April referendum, and our discussions followed with how to pay for it. And some of that is still a little bit in flux, but April's really important. The timing of this, we said we'd go as fast as we can, and so April is as fast as we can get it on, so that's what we're working towards. If you came tonight to tell us that you're concerned that we work on it really fast, feel free to say that if you want, but I'm telling you that the board has looked at the engineering studies. We are favorably disposed towards the most comprehensive solution and committed to make that happen as fast as possible. That's my report.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions about the consent agenda? If not, could I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon. Yes. Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
We're at that time where if there's anyone in the public that would like to address the trustees about a matter that is not on the agenda, this would be the time. Is there anybody that would like to talk to us other than about matters that are on the agenda? All right, can I have the village manager's report, please?
Certainly. We're going to kick off the manager's report this evening. Director of Public Safety, Carrie Lewandowski, is going to provide a brief update to the board this evening regarding a recent string of burglaries that's been impacting Glencoe and a number of our neighboring communities. And Carrie, if you would bring us up to speed on that.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. As has been reported in the local media, there have been 10 residential burglaries in Glencoe over the last 2 or 3 months. They're likely related to at least one crime pattern affecting Glencoe and surrounding communities. The department has issued press releases and weekly crime reports to the local media. We've also posted some crime bulletins on our website to inform the community. And in addition, we did a broadcast message over Glencoe Connect to make the community aware and to basically share the information and solicit residents' assistance with these cases. The basic facts are most of the burglaries occur between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. The offenders are targeting unoccupied homes and are possibly in the area watching residents leaving their homes. Burglars will often ring the front doorbell to determine if anyone is home before they walk around the rear of the house to see if there's unsecured windows or doors, or they'll force entry in the rear of the house as well. During our public notices, we're asking residents to make sure that your home is secured and locked whenever you're away. If you have a burglar alarm system, please put your burglar alarm system on, even if you're only going to be gone for a few minutes. Even if you're just out for a few minutes visiting with a neighbor or walking the dog, we ask that you please secure your house and activate your burglar alarm if at all possible. Like I said earlier, we're looking for your help in solving this crime pattern. We want you to be aware of unfamiliar people or cars in your neighborhood, and please report that to us and get descriptions if you can. I will say that after the media ran with this story a little bit, there is a heightened awareness throughout town. Every day, on a daily basis, we're getting suspicious auto and persons reports. We respond to every one of those calls. Unfortunately, to date, none of those reports have led to any development of leads or anything like that. However, I will say that this pattern affects more communities than just Glencoe. Our detectives are aware of it. They're working with detectives from other communities who are experiencing a similar pattern. And some leads have been developed. There is an active investigation, and we're hoping that very soon we will be able to identify some offenders, arrest them, and charge them accordingly. That's my report.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes,
A
ma'am.
couple questions. I'm curious, to date, is there
Could you
any-
identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry, sure, I'm Jan Sachs. I live at 1005 Elm Ridge Drive in Glencoe. There's been at least 2 burglaries, if not 3, on our street on Elm Ridge. So I'm very aware, as are all our neighbors. We've made them all aware personally. I'm curious if the potential thieves here are women. Do you have any leads on whether or not they may be women as opposed to men? Because we always assume that they're men breaking in. Do we have any ideas? There's women breaking in? Or
We
they
do have
women?
some idea. We do have some possible suspects we identified. I don't want to go into detail with that,
Okay.
but suffice it to say that anybody who's in your neighborhood that's suspicious, whether it's a man or a woman,
Right.
we ask you to please call us.
But I want to raise people's consciousness on the fact that this could be a woman, because I don't think we think like that. We just assume it's some guys breaking in or whatever. But I had a recent incident that was a woman involved, and it got me to thinking for the first time that there could be women involved in these burglaries. The other thing is, I understand they're going in through back doors, and I understand they're often going in through patio or sliding doors. Is that the case?
In several instances, that has been the case, yes.
And are they opening these doors, or are they breaking patio doors?
If they're unlocked, they'll open them. If they're locked, they will break through.
They will break through a patio door.
Yes.
So that's scary. So even locking our patio doors with all kinds of locks doesn't keep them. That's shocking to me that they're going through a patio door. But they are doing that.
Yes, they are.
Okay. And to date, has there been anybody in a home when they have entered, to your knowledge?
No. Not even, no. They're specifically targeting unoccupied homes.
And are they targeting anything besides jewelry and cash, which is what we have been told?
There are many things that are being stolen. I don't want to go into specifics with that either.
Okay.
Anything of value in your house is susceptible to theft.
Yes, I know that. But from what I was told and from what I understood, they were mostly after jewelry and cash.
That's normally what most burglars do go into houses for, yes, but there are other things stolen as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Zena Reiner, 1000 Smoky Ridge. How long are they staying in the houses? Do you have any idea?
That's impossible to tell. My guess would be anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. It's very fast.
That's what
Yes.
What scares me is if I'm in the house, you know, like if they would ring the doorbell, they wouldn't see the car because the car's in the garage, and if they would ring the doorbell, I'm taking a shower or something, I think that scares me more than let them take what they want from me. Okay, so in and out.
Yes, it's very, very fast.
Thank you, Carrie. A couple of points to make relative to a few other things going on in town. Leaf collection is continuing, though the cold snap that we've been experiencing makes us think more of snow than leaves. It is continuing through next week. We'll be making final passes through each neighborhood, and we're expecting to be completed with that by next Friday. A few special events coming up related to Thanksgiving and the holiday season. The Glencoe Interfaith Thanksgiving service is 7 o'clock this coming Sunday, the 23rd, at North Shore United Methodist Church. That's at the corner of Hazel and Greenleaf. And I encourage you to attend if you're able to do so. And as well, our official Glencoe kickoff to the holiday season, Light the Village Lights ceremony, is taking place next Friday, November 28th. That's the day after Thanksgiving, 5 p.m. at the corner of Park and Vernon Avenues. Village president or his designee will be throwing the switch, and the lights in downtown Glencoe will come alive. Crews have been busy finishing those up the last few weeks and getting cold hands in the process, but I believe it's going to look beautiful as always. There are additional events through that weekend that the Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring, so I'd encourage you to participate in that as well. And last but not least, I wanted to mention that yesterday at our annual Employee Appreciation Luncheon, it was announced that Al Kebby, our Deputy Chief in our Department of Public Safety, and nearly a 35-year employee of the department, was named the 2014 Employee of the Year. He was nominated by his peers in his department, and the nomination was one of several this year, and was reviewed by a staff team. Carrie, did you want to mention a couple things and embarrass Al appropriately?
Yes, but only if he joins me.
Because since I have to be embarrassed with my picture up there on the screen, might as well get him embarrassed too.
I just want to take this opportunity. I'd like to kind of read from the nomination form, which is what the selection committee used to confer this award on. Al Kebby's been employed with the village since July 1st of 1980. He was promoted to lieutenant on July 16th of 1990 and deputy chief on October 16th of 2009. Since his promotion to deputy chief, he's undertaken the responsibilities of both the police and fire components of the public safety department. In early 2013, Al was selected and served as the interim director of public safety for 4 months until a new director was appointed. Deputy Chief Kebby has been instrumental in the transition to the new director. He provided continuity, stability, and guidance to the director and members of the department. During the recent contract negotiations, he provided insight and perspective at the bargaining table and during preparatory strategy sessions with the village. Al's dedication to the village has been evident throughout his 34-year career. His continued leadership and experience will be vital as the department experiences expected growth and operational changes over the next few years. Congratulations, Al.
I just wanted to add my congratulations to Al on a very well-deserved award. And he's been an invaluable employee to the village, and it was very nice that he was recognized. Thank you, Al.
And Al, I'll just ask, Al has had quite a banner week. He celebrated the birth of a grandchild on Tuesday, and on Wednesday he was named Employee of the Year, so I'm wondering what happened today. Anything hit?
Structure fire in Winnetka.
Oh, there we go, all right. I just add to all the things that have been said and to what President Levin stated that I've been here about a year now, and Al's been a great resource to me as well as to Carrie and to so many others. But just to extend my congratulations further and thanks to you for what is not an ended career by any stretch of the imagination. We've got plenty of things for you to still do. Before I end, I want to note also that Tom Weathers, who's our water plant superintendent, was awarded an honorable mention yesterday as well. Tom is going to be retiring in the middle of December after about 26 years here with the village, and we're going to bring him to the December 18th board meeting and suitably embarrass him because at that point he will actually be retired. But I did want to mention he was nominated by those that he works with down at the plant, and his long tenure of service has led to a tremendous operation down at the water plant that's won the village a number of awards, and I extend my congratulations to him as well on that recognition. And with that, I will wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Barbara, was there a meeting of the Plan Commission that you can tell us about?
There was, and I can. Plan Commission met on October 22nd. Our consultants, Bridget Lane, together with our village planner, Lou Brown, led a discussion on economic development. And there will be a written report on that prepared by staff, and so I'm not going to I'm not gonna go into it in the interest of time. Our next meeting will be on December 3rd, that's a Wednesday. There will be 2 panels that evening. The first one at 6:30 will include staff leaders from the Village, Park District, Library, and Family Services. And then the second panel, which convenes at 7:30, will be comprised of local civic leaders. The public, as always, is welcome and encouraged to attend. And this is, by the way, I don't think I said it, on the downtown tune-up project that the Plan Commission is working on. That's it.
Thank you. Dale, is any report on Monday's meeting of the golf committee?
Yes, we did meet Monday. It will come as no surprise to anybody that there aren't many people playing golf this week. Indeed, because of the overall weather in the golf season this year, the number of rounds played for the year have actually diminished versus last year. The good news is, as usual, Stella has managed the course such that the revenues exceed the budget, the expenses are below the budget, and the overall revenues, even compared to last year, which had far more rounds, have been very good, and the revenue is net revenue is very close. Some of you, if you've driven by the golf course, may have seen this new split rail fence that's on the other side of the driving range. I know it's hard to believe, but some golfers managed to hit balls from the first tee into the driving range, and were wont to just wander onto the driving range even though people were hitting balls, and this wasn't a very good solution. So we're hopeful that the split rail fence, besides looking nice, will discourage some people at least from wandering over into the line of fire. We discussed a little bit the capital budget for next year, but really we will be getting into that next month. Stella asked us all to think of what capital projects we might want to see. The one thing you can be sure of is that Stella will have a very thorough list of capital projects to continue the improvement of the course, which for those of you who do play golf or even just look at the golf course, has improved from year to year to year to the point where it's really one of the most well-regarded public courses around Chicago.
Thank you. Our next order of business, as part of my report, is to take up the nomination to reappoint Paula Alexandra to the Glencoe Community Relations Forum. And could I have and is there any discussion on that, or could I have a motion?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries. Okay, the next order of business is one that is always a great pleasure. It's consideration of a resolution honoring Katie Sweeney for her years of service with the Holiday Food and Toy Drive. And the proclamation that we had was, whereas Katie Sweeney has served the village of Glencoe as Community Service Officer, managing the annual Holiday Toy and Food Drive from 1991 to 2013, supporting the well-being of residents in the village of Glencoe, New Trier Township, and the greater community. And whereas Katie Sweeney commitment to the toy and food drive enabled individuals and families in Glencoe and New Trier Township to share in the blessings and goodwill of the holiday season, ensuring that those in need were not left out. And whereas Katie Sweeney has worked closely with the leadership of Family Services of Glencoe, New Trier Township, North Shore Senior Center, Shoreline Place, local churches and synagogues, neighboring police departments, and the Village of Glencoe personnel to ensure that families in need were consistently served by the annual toy and food drive. Whereas Katie Sweeney's time and generosity has allowed the food and toy drive to benefit over 1,500 households, 1,200 children, and 50 pets. Hundreds of toys have been distributed to Toys for Tots, Albany Park Community Center, the ARC Project's Toys for Hanukkah, the YWCA, the City of Evanston's Fifth Ward. Hundreds of pounds of food have been distributed to Nutria Township Food Pantry, Northfield Township Food Pantry, Palatine Food Pantry, Evanston's Fifth Ward Food Pantry, and the Albany Park Community Center Food Pantry. And whereas Katie Sweeney's coordination of food and toy drive volunteers involved the entire community, including Village of Glencoe employees, Glencoe Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, the Nutria High School hockey team, Winnetka Youth Hockey Team, Girls for Good Deeds, Skokie Country Club, Lakeshore Country Club, NSSED Glencoe Central School, Grand Food Center, especially Michael Menzing, Pascal Poor Ellie employees, Harris Bank employees, Glencoe Shell, Glencoe School District 35, the Glencoe Park District, Glencoe Junior Kindergarten, Korean Carmel Presbyterian Church, North Shore United Methodist Church, An Shalom, St. Elizabeth's Church, the Glencoe Human Relations Forum, the Glencoe Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 136, Glencoe Rotary, and other residents, friends, and family. And whereas Katie Sweeney has demonstrated outstanding service and a long-term commitment to improving the lives of Glencoe residents, and has consistently shown compassion for those less fortunate during the holidays, with her willingness to go above and beyond to bring relief and joy to others. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Village President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Glencoe, Illinois, express on behalf of all the residents of the village their appreciation to Katie Sweeney for her outstanding service to the community. Be it further resolved that this resolution be spread upon the minutes of this proceeding, and that an executed copy of the resolution subscribed with the signature of the village president and bearing the corporate seal of the Village of Glencoe is attested by the clerk be presented to Katie Sweeney, dated this 20th day of November, AD 2014, at the Village of Glencoe, Cook County, Illinois. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No, all opposed. Passes unanimously. Katie, would you come up so we can give you this? We don't often get the honors of tremendous people who do this. These are the super women of the village. Yeah.
Was never been alone.
Inspired all those
And
people.
fortunately for all of us in Glencoe and the entire Nutria area, there's a great group of women who are continuing. And I'm sure that Margo wants to say a couple of words about how it will continue on.
Marco?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks so much.
I am here on behalf of the new Glencoe Community Holiday Drive, that our committee, our executive committee, I guess you could say, is seated over here. We want to, first of all, thank Katie. I mean, we would not be doing this if it weren't for her. And she meets with us weekly. She keeps reminding us of who we need to call, who we need to talk to. She's hooked us up with 4 organizations. We've truncated it a bit because Katie was a superstar, and we don't know that we are going to be the superstar that she is, but we've truncated it. We're working with 4 different organizations. Tremendous thanks to the village for your support. Again, we could not do it without you. To the village employees, wow, the raffle yesterday got us off the ground. I mean, we're only a quarter of the way where we need to be as far as collecting, but it's not even Thanksgiving yet. So we're feeling good. Also, thanks to the Grand Food Center, they're, as of yesterday, selling $20 care packages. They're getting it to us at wholesale, and those care packages will go to low-income seniors and adults with disabilities in Shoreline. So we're trying to do as much as we can for as many families. We're focusing on Glencoe residents primarily before we start stretching our wings out to Katy, who reach the entire township. But again, we want to thank you. We are working with the Park District, the library, and the school district, so we've taken a lot of Katie's guidance and information and try to, do what we can. And again, we just want to thank the board and thank the village and thank Bill and Gary and everybody else that's helping us out.
Wait, got a question. I understand from you, your colleagues, Dave, Clark, that we can make gifts and make it out to the village of Glencoe?
You can.
Okay. And I'm told that in the memo line, it should be Glencoe Community Holiday Bread?
That's right.
Good. Well, I wanted to make it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margot. And again, Katie, thank you for all of your wonderful service. You are terrific. You are welcome. I wanted to also mention to the board that in the schedule that we have adopted, just to remind everybody that the February board meeting, so that we get it into your calendars now, is on the 4th Thursday rather than the 3rd Thursday of February. So it's February 26th. So I just call that to your attention. The next board meeting, of course, is December 18th, 2014. So we are on track for December. The next order of business is consideration of the 2014 Stormwater Drainage Report, Part 2, which is the portion that relates to the Skokie Basin drainage area or the Skokie Ridge drainage basin and the Madison Avenue drainage basin. And I understand, Rod, you're here tonight. Are you going to present for us?
Yeah, Mr. President, I'll make a few brief introductory comments and then I'll turn it over to our consultant. We are back with the second part of the study that was approved by the board in July. As you recall, following spring flooding in May and June, the board authorized a comprehensive stormwater drainage study of 5 areas in the village that are continuing to experience significant street and right-of-way flooding. That report, the first half of that report was presented at the October village board meeting when we talked about and presented the Terrace Court and Greenwood Avenue drainage basins. Tonight, as noted, we are back to present our report at this stage on the Skokie Ridge and Madison Avenue drainage basins. This information was presented in a preliminary report to the village board in their packet last week. It was also made available to the public on the village's website for the latter part of last week as well. Tonight, staff and engineers from Engineering Resource Associates will present details and findings of the study. Just maybe by way of procedure, our plan tonight is to present the results for the Skokie Ridge Basin and then answer any and all questions from those present on that basin, and then we will move to the Madison Avenue Basin. And I would ask those present if you would let us get through the presentation, and then we're going to allow as much time as we need for questions. We can even go back to exhibits on there. So if it's just as well, we'd like to have Rod have an opportunity to get through the presentation first. With us tonight are Rod Beadle and Marty Michalisco from Engineering Resource Associates, the consultants working with village staff on this study. I also would acknowledge 2 of our key staff members, Don Kirk of our office and village engineer Christine Van Dornick are here as well to listen and participate. So with that, I would introduce and turn it over to Rod.
Thank you, Dave. Can you go to the first slide? So Engineering Resource Associates was retained earlier this year to evaluate the cause, extent, and limits of, as Dave mentioned, severe flooding reported at 4 locations within the
Excuse
village.
me, may I ask that we speak into the microphone a little bit more? It's a little difficult to hear back
Sorry,
here.
you might-
Thank you so much.
Is that on okay? Yeah. So, again, we were asked to look at 4 areas, and about a month ago, we presented preliminary findings on 2 of those areas, Terrace Court and Greenwood Avenue. Tonight, we'd like to discuss our preliminary findings for the causes and potential improvements that could alleviate flooding in the Skokie Ridge area, which has a 75-acre tributary area, and Madison Avenue is a smaller but no less severe flooding problem area with an 8-acre tributary area. In doing our analysis, we relied on a number of approaches. First and foremost, we use hydrologic and hydraulic modeling software. In this case, we used a program called XP Swim that models rainstorms as time-varied events and both has a capability to model underground storm sewers and culverts as well as overland flow paths. We also distributed through the village resident surveys. We use those surveys to correlate the findings from the hydraulic modeling. We interviewed public works staff and got their input on the character and location of many of the flooding problems. And then finally, we performed site visits and limited topographic survey in areas where we needed additional information. So we looked at several storm events. When you look at flooding problems, you want to look at both recurrent issues as well as issues during more severe storm events. And so we looked at storms that we would refer in our industry to as the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events. It's a little unfortunate that again, in our industry, and in just the hydrologic realm, we refer to storms that way. What we should really be talking about is the percent chance that any given storm will occur in any given year. So really a 100-year storm is not an event that we would expect to occur once every 100 years. It's an event that has a 1% chance of occurring any given year. So a 2-year storm would have a 50% chance. So you might expect a storm like that to occur every 2 years, but you might have a 100-year and a 2-year storm in the same year. You can go to the next slide. I can give a few examples. So let's consider again what we would call a 2-year storm, or a storm with a 50% chance of occurring in any given year. By current definitions in the state of Illinois, we rely upon published data from the Illinois State Water Survey to define these storm events, and they're based upon the depth and duration of a rainfall event. So if we had a storm that lasted 3 hours and dropped 1.9 inches of rainfall during that 3-hour period, we would consider that to be a 2-year storm or a 50% chance of occurrence. For a 10-year storm or a 10% chance of occurrence, that would increase to a 2.9-inch rainfall. And for a 100-year storm, again for a 3-hour storm event, it would be a 4.9-inch rainfall. We also look at other durations for the same recurrence interval, other durations of storms that would involve different depths of rainfall. So I don't show it up here, but a 100-year storm that lasted 24 hours would put 7.6 inches of rainfall. So it's an inexact science, but we do have very exact definitions of what a given rainstorm recurrence interval would be considered. We also put up here a number of recent significant events that have occurred in Glencoe. 3 during this year and 1 in 2011. We'll start with July 23rd, 2011. We had reported at Chicago Executive Airport, or the old Milwaukee Airport, 5.2 inches of rainfall in a 3-hour period. And that rainfall for that event would be considered a 110-year event, or again, about a 1% chance of occurring. just a little ways to the south of that, at Chicago O'Hare, we actually that day experienced the most rainfall in Chicago in any single day in recorded history, and we had a 3-hour rainstorm event that dumped almost 7 inches of rain. That was actually a 300-year event, or an event with a 0.33% chance of occurring in any given year. So the reason I call it an inexact science is that you can see from that example that you can have dramatic differences in the depth of rainfall and the actual characterization of a storm in relatively short geographic different areas. May 12th of this year, we had a 3.4-inch rainfall. Looks like the fly is being pointed. We had a 3.4-inch rainfall. It lasted for 5 hours. That would equate to a 15-year storm event because it was a little longer duration, similar amount of rainstorm for a 10-year storm, but a longer duration being 5 hours. So it seemed like a really heavy event, and it was. It's a 15-year rainfall, but it wasn't the 100-year rainfall that some people might have thought it was. June 21st, we had another significant event. That was about 1.6 inches, but that was in 1 hour. And so that was a 3-year storm event. And then June 30th, we had a 2.1-inch rainfall, lasted about 6 hours, and I believe that was a 2-year storm event is what that is. So, probably maybe a little more explanation than I need to get into, but I think it's important to understand that when we talk about year rainfalls, we're really talking about percent chance of that rainfall occurring in any given year. Not necessarily saying this 100-year rainfall is going to only happen once every 100 years. We looked first at Skokie Ridge watershed, and we used topographic data from the village's GIS system, as well as data on the existing storm sewer systems running through the area. I think we have a little over 30 or 35 individual sub-watersheds within the drainage basin. Those are areas tributary to different sections of storm sewer, and a total tributary area of 75 acres. Generally, the watershed drains from north to south, and it's drained by a system of storm sewers, again, running mostly north to south, being intercepted at sunset in some spots. We do have a relatively new 60-inch storm sewer off of Oak Ridge Drive, where in the past we've experienced really significant ponding here and basement overflows. So in 2006, we installed a 60-inch storm sewer and ran that along Dundee Road over to the east diversion ditch. The important thing to note on that storm sewer is it was sized to accept flows from the whole tributary area. But at the time, it only extended to this location. And we also have a second storm sewer system that takes flows mostly from the eastern portion of the basin and connects into a much older storm sewer along Dundee Road. Starts out as a 15-inch, becomes 24 west of Holfelder, and increases to a 42-inch. And it does take on additional flow from other areas as it moves towards the east diversion ditch. Next slide. So this is a representation of existing conditions during different storm events. Fortunately, it's a little hard to see with the colors, but the red represents a more frequent storm event, which would be the 2-year event rate. So, and you can see, so red areas would be here along Skokie Ridge, a little bit along Dundee Road, and I think a little bit even over on Bluff here. When we get to more intense rainstorms, the 10, 50, and 100, we start to see other areas that start to flood. Well, this color's just not show up very well, but the green and the yellow are the 10 and 50-year storm events. And you can see over here off of Bluff Road, we have a depressional area where it overflows when it exceeds the capacity of this 15-inch storm sewer that runs through rear yards, and it causes significant yard flooding coming off of the right-of-way, actually drains out to Dundee Road. Then we have another depressional area here on Skokie Ridge that all that water flows to, as well as water coming from the north. And so we have our most significant flooding in this area. And again, most of that flooding is related to undersized storm sewer systems that just don't have the capacity to take all of this surface flow in. And then in the case coming off of Bluff Road, a rather poorly defined overflow path with lots of obstructions that further or make the flooding damage a little bit worse. The blue represents areas that flood then during the 100-year storm event, and you can see that during those especially intense storms, we have significant road flooding up along Sunset and again over on Bluff, in addition to all the other flooding that's here. In our modeling, identified 30 locations, 30 properties that were significantly affected by this flooding in the 100-year event. And those properties are shown with the yellow dots. Now, the thing I want to emphasize on that is that that doesn't mean that that's all of the flooding that occurs within this particular area. It's just the areas that the modeling showed as being affected by flooding from backups of the public storm sewer system or overflows from the public right-of-way into private property. Next slide. So again, this table shows the number of properties that the modeling and analysis showed as being susceptible to damage during a given storm event. So in Skokie Ridge, under existing conditions for the 2-year event, we have 6 properties, and again, that was mostly down towards the Skokie Ridge area. That increases to 8 properties in the 10-year event, and it really jumps up to 30 properties during a 50-year storm, or again, a 2% chance of occurring in any given year. And for the 1% storm or the 100-year event, we also have the same 30 properties affected. Next slide. So we look at, we typically want to look at 2 scenarios when we look at the proposed conditions. If I were designing a subdivision under the current rules and guidelines that we use in converting a farm field into a residential subdivision, we look for 2 things in our storm sewer design. One is we look for our storm sewer to be capable of carrying the 10-year storm. So we don't want any surface flooding at all in any event up to and including the 10-year or the 10% recurrence interval. We try and get that into our storm sewers. For anything above the 10-year storm event, especially up to and including the 100-year storm event, we rely upon surface pathways, either overflow in between homes and ditches, or more preferably along roadways for that to convey flow away from any given area. So in a new subdivision, when you get above the 10-year storm event, it's acceptable to have flows in your roadways, but up to the storm event, you want those flows in your storm sewers. Typically, when we're working in a more developed and an older community like Glencoe is, where it's been relatively developed for a very long time, we find that those subdivisions and residential storm sewers were not necessarily designed by those standards. And so very often, when we're analyzing these systems, we find that we might have only a 2-year or 5-year level of protection in the storm sewer. And beyond that, we also typically find that there was less attention in original design paid to overland flow routes. And so when you get beyond that storm sewer capacity, as we have in the case here along Bluff, you find that those overflow into residential areas, and they cause structural damage, yard damage, or even right-of-way damage from the flooding. So So we look at two scenarios in doing our design. We look at the 10-year because that's the very least amount that we want to be able to try and get into our storm sewers. But we also tend in older communities to also look at what would it take to convey the 100-year event using storm sewers, recognizing that we may not have the opportunity to better define our overland flow routes because those areas have already been defined for a long time, if that makes sense. So our first scenario is looking at the 10% flood risk alternative or the 10-year design. And in order to provide a 10-year level of protection to the subdivision or to the drainage area, we would propose to install new storm sewers in two locations. One would be, and the new storm sewers are shown in yellow on this, one would be along Sunset to catch flows here, is that Elm Ridge, I think? And heading west, then along Sunset towards Hofelder, we would connect into the existing storm sewer system that is tributary to that 60-inch that was installed in 2006. The second storm sewer would be installed along Bluff Road, and this would be a more substantial capital improvement simply because we don't have a real good location to run it as a short storm sewer. We would need to run it along Bluff Road out to Dundee Road, and then along Dundee Road to connect into the 60-inch storm sewer just east of Hofelder. And a little hard to see, but I think that gets from a 15-inch to an 18-inch, and then it's a 24-inch storm sewer further down on Dundee Road. That's using storm sewer what it would take to provide a 10-year level of protection. Now this alternative also shows, you'll see that we still have the green, which is the 50-year flood limits, and then beyond the 50-year, we still have the blue, which is the 100-year flooding limits. And those limits don't change much because those storms are so much more intense than a 10-year that when you exceed the 10-year design, you tend to have very similar flooding characteristics. So a 50-year storm is not going to look much different as far as the flooding if you were to install just the 10-year level of protection. I think that's good. So again, our second scenario that we look at for our alternative design then is the 1% flood risk or 100-year level of protection. It's very similar to the 10-year design. We just would go with a larger size storm sewer in order to accommodate additional flows. So along Sunset, we would propose to install this 24-inch interceptor storm sewer. Again, it would still be connected to the 60-inch along Oak Ridge. And then along Bluff Road, we want to extend a little bit further to pick up some areas to the east that show flooding problems during a 100-year storm. And we would increase the size of this from 15-inch to 24-inch. And then as it continues down Dundee Road, I think it gets as large as a 36-inch. Yeah, a 36-inch where it would connect into the 60. Under this scenario, this would provide then a 100-year level of protection or protection against the event that has a 1% chance of occurring. I think that's it for that slide. So we looked at construction costs for each of these alternatives. We've used unit prices from similar projects in the project area over the last couple of years. You do have a 10% or I think maybe even a 20% construction contingency cost in this. But to provide the 10-year level of protection, alternative one has a price tag of about $1.2 million in construction costs. To provide the 100-year level of protection would be about a 50% increase in the overall cost of the project to $1.8 million. Next slide. And so now we can look at both of those alternatives and the reduction in the number of properties directly affected by either yard flooding, structure flooding, or roadway flooding associated with the public right-of-way or the public storm sewer. You can see again, existing conditions for the 2-year, we have 6. With the 10-year level of protection, that would be reduced down to 0. Same for the 10-year storm, those 8 properties would be alleviated. And then for the 50 and the 100, we have similar results. The 10-year design would only reduce 2 properties out of the flood damage, but the 100-year design would provide the benefit for all 30 of those. So it is a 50% increase in cost for the 100-year level of protection. It's a much more significant improvement as far as the reduction in number of properties affected. So with that, with Skokie Ridge, we'll talk next about Madison, but with Skokie Ridge, I'll open it to your questions.
I just want to preface it to the audience, somewhat carrying Bruce, Trustee Collins' comments. He said that our meeting before this meeting is already calendaring a referendum issue in April, where we're going to be putting it, expecting to be putting it to the voters to seek approval, A, and B, the approval that we're discussing is all the 100-year level. So hopefully that will answer a lot of your comments.
Other questions from the trustees?
Your written report, you didn't mention it tonight, pointed to the importance of some private property improvements to fully alleviate. Well, I suppose fully alleviate is a relative term.
Yeah.
No one can ever design anything that will prevent all flooding, but if you could speak for a minute about the extent of private property improvements that would be necessary. I mean, the village can and hopefully will do everything that will make this part happen, but it won't stop all flooding unless...
Right, and it's important to point out that we are looking at improvements to alleviate flooding associated with the village's storm sewer system and associated with the public right-of-way. So we aren't necessarily looking at alleviating through public funds private issues within private lots. At the same time, these improvements, by reducing the depth and severity of flooding in the public right-of-way, or in some cases flowing from the public right-of-way into private property, does provide an excellent opportunity to address those individual problems, whether that's through yard grading in order to provide a more positive outlet, or private storm sewer connecting to the public system, that now if the public system has capacity in it, is much more able to accept those flows. But our study and these costs are associated with the public portion of that.
Okay, and at which point I'm going to ask a follow-up question of our Director of Public Works. Assuming that the village proceeds as fast as possible to make public improvements and these private issues remain, have you been in contact with the affected property owners about what they would need to do with their private property? Are they coming to you for advice, or?
We've had a number of residents that we've met with since this past spring. And that's a regular occurrence for us, following, and not just in 2014, following any major rainfall events. We'll go and meet with anybody that asks to meet with us and advise and consult on options available. And as Rod indicated, in many cases that's both a public and a private improvement that may be required to address those problems.
Okay, but we haven't surveyed what all those private improvements would be. We're just responding when somebody says, I have a flooding problem. What can you advise me?
Generally, we're aware of most, particularly in this drainage basin specifically, we're aware of where many of those pocket problem areas are, even within a block face, backyard drainage problems. We also had a fair number of sanitary sewer backups that occurred in this area, particularly with the May event and again with one of the June events. We've done some follow-up investigation both with individuals and with our system in that area through a variety of means of investigative efforts of dye testing and cleaning and televising and some smoke testing, trying to determine whether that problem is all public or there again a problem of a combination of public and private. So,
Do you think it would help to get some communications out to the residents about their need to investigate what's going on their private property?
we sure can. I mean, it's been pretty consistent since the spring, including inviting that entire area to participate in our survey and to reach out. We've had a fairly steady line of communication from residents in the Skokie Heights and Ridges since May.
Okay, thanks. I mean, obviously our concern is we do what we can to make it better, and it doesn't make it fully better, and the reason it's not better is something that the village itself can't fix, at which point I would think it's not our obligation to fix private property, but it would be our obligation to communicate to people that they may have some personal responsibility to take some steps to relieve their problems.
And this is this situation is very similar to what we saw with improvements to the east diversion ditch years ago. Was many of the drainage problems in Glencoe couldn't really be adequately addressed with storm sewer or whatever until the issues in the east diversion ditch were addressed because of the lack of capacity there. But once those were relatively well addressed, that gave us an opportunity to do other public improvements that have significantly reduced flooding in other areas. So in the case of private property flooding, doing these public improvements, again, kind of give relief downstream to where the private property flooding problems will flow to. So it gives an opportunity for those private improvements to go in and be much more effective than if they were done without any public improvements.
Let me ask a question just to make sure that it's clear. Is what you're saying that with these public improvements, if we did the 100-year or what I call the Class 1 storm improvements, there will be adequate capacity that if the private residents took the proper steps to alleviate their flooding, they can divert the water into the storm sewers, and the storm sewers are sized to handle that diversion?
The storm sewers are sized to handle the entire tributary area. Individual drainage issues within individual private lots are all unique, and their causes are as different as the individual homes. So it would be difficult to say that these improvements will definitely alleviate those problems, but it gives an opportunity for them to be alleviated. And if you can get the water to the storm sewer, yes, the storm sewer is sized to accommodate. If that answers your question.
Clarify. These are sized so that if they take the steps, the various homeowners, that it would take to clear up their problems and convey the water to the storm sewer system. The storm sewer system will be sized to accept it.
You said that much better than I did, yes.
Okay. Should we do public questions with respect to this area, and then we'll get to the second area afterwards? I know that several people had signed up to speak. Let's first do questions, and we can do the speaking part afterwards. Are there other questions with respect to this area that you'd like to address? That gentleman.
Hi, I'm Craig Ostroff. I live at 905 Elmridge.
You want to come on up? Get you.
I'm Craig Ostroff at 975 Elmridge. Turns into late every time it storms. I filled out a survey. I haven't heard from anybody about what's going on. Your explanation showed work up in the bluff area in Skokie Heights and working down Sunset Ridge. So am I to understand that that will offset all the water coming down into the bowl, which is in front of my street, and will take care of that water issue? Is that what you're saying?
Can I ask exactly where on Elmridge are you?
Right on the corner.
Right on the corner, yeah.
Elmridge and Skokie Ridge.
Yes, so the improvements are designed to accommodate flows from there. You can see there's a new storm sewer that would go in along Skokie Ridge from that low area, and that's designed to take the flow that comes from the north, as well as the flow that comes through these rear yards and along Dundee Road and is directed board's application. So
Okay, because it wasn't clear in your earlier presentation what was happening on Skokie Ridge. We just heard, but I
No,
just.
you're right, I forgot to mention that we are picking up flow from the low point on Skokie Ridge, and that's that yellow 24-inch storm.
Okay, so what I understand then is that there's a current, I saw a report that there was an 8-inch sewer there now.
They're very small sewers in some areas, yes.
And so you're gonna replace that with a 24-inch.
Yes, sir.
And that will accommodate for that flow. So there's another question, and I don't understand, I wanna see if you can add some texture to this. Coming down Elmwood Drive from Skokie, all the water just flows down that street, through the yard and along the street, and it crosses through my yard as well as my neighbors, the Spiros. How is that going to be dealt with?
So, you're talking about coming down here
Yeah.
and into there. And again, there is existing storm sewer, relatively large, it's 21-inch diameter here. The problem is that there's an 8-inch diameter right at the low spot. So the 24-inch will help take some of that flow away. It's really designed to also take all of this flow away. And so between the new storm sewer and the existing storm sewer, that is designed to accommodate the flows from that area.
So based on the eye test that Mr. Mao and his team did, it says all of the water goes north, down and takes a left and goes west along Oak Ridge into that larger drain. So nothing you have said adds any clarification or remediation to the issue of the water coming from the east headed south.
So, I'm not sure other than what I've explained to say that it's designed to accommodate that flow. And that flow is coming down here. Some of it gets intercepted at the 24, some of it is in the 21-inch and runs over to the 60-inch. But it's sized in order to handle. You have to look at the area as a whole, because this is really a lot of flow coming from different directions into one spot.
It ends up in my yard.
Could I clarify here? If I understand you correctly, there's a 21-inch pipe feeding into an 8-inch pipe. So there's nowhere for it to go, and the solution would be for a 21-inch pipe to connect to a 24-inch pipe.
No, but the 8-inch actually drains into the 21, and it's inadequate to handle that low area. Much of the water that Mr. Ostroff referred to is coming off of the street on Elm Ridge.
And that was the other thing.
But the majority of that is contributed to that backyard drainage because of the problems coming off of Bluff Road. What this 100-year solution provides for is enough capacity to capture all that water within the pipe and not allow it to leave the roadway.
Right, so the work coming from Bluff down Dundee will take that water that's currently flowing off of Dundee and creating whirlpools in front of my house in the spot.
Correct. Right.
And
one fundamental change here is where right now you're absolutely correct that the low point on Skokie Ridge drains north into that system and this will be redirected to the 24-inch will pull that water out of that low area and drain it south into the Dundee Road system.
There was also some talk about overlaying. I didn't quite understand what that was.
Overland flow?
Overland flow. Were you going to raise the street at all? Or
No.
just put new drains in?
No, the overland flow refers to the water that runs. A good example of that is the water that races through from Bluff to the Dundee Road properties out down the sidewalk on Dundee. That's all overland flow that ends up in the pool at the bottom of Skokie Ridge. All of that will be captured with this size storm sewer system up on Bluff, so where it'll never leave and enter those backyards.
So what about that overland flow that's north of Dundee? That's coming in off of Elm Ridge, you're saying this will happen?
Dave, can you go to the existing conditions of flooding? Right here at Bluff, there's a significant, this sewer reaches its capacity, it
Excuse me, is
overflows.
there a way to blow that up? Because I think a lot of us, it would be useful if you could blow that up. Any possibility of doing that?
I think that's a fix.
All right.
Well, in this green here, this is the overflow path when this storm sewer on Bluff reaches its capacity, and all that flow then comes down Bluff, down Dundee, and right into your area. The second overland flow path through your yards. The second overland flow path comes.
If I may, if you really want to see it, you're not bothering me if you want to walk up here. Everybody wants to walk up here and see it. We can't make it larger, but if it helps you, then come on up.
Well, I'm concerned that you all don't seem to be addressing this, at least so that I can understand, and I'm sure other people can. What about this flow that's coming? You all haven't talked about that at all.
Proposed. The proposed solution.
Go back to the 1%. Yeah, we have, Craig, let's explain it better.
Right here, this storm sewer here on Sunset, the purpose of that storm sewer is to intercept all the flow coming from the north and get it out so it doesn't pond and doesn't flow through those private properties. So a combination of these three storm sewers, the 24 on Sunset, the 30, 36 off the bluff, and this little stretch of 24 on the low area, those three are all aimed at addressing all the overland flow that comes through and ends up in the area.
So what we're trying to do is to intercept it before it gets there.
Okay. I live right here, so that's, I get it all. So what you're saying, you're offsetting it, putting it into bigger pipes and taking it away. And this stuff, as opposed to going north, it's gonna go south.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to intercept it so it doesn't all get directed to that.
Because what happens when the storm sewer is out of capacity, it surcharges and it's a raging river that through there. So if we can keep it in the pipe before it even does that, it helps protect that.
Okay. Thank you all.
Jan Sachs, did you have a question?
Yes. Do I have one?
Hi, I'm Jan Sachs, 1005 Elm Ridge Drive. I had a lot of questions. Probably the most important is specifically how this all might, like Craig, how this might affect my specific property. But before I go there, because I'm not sure that I will understand it, because we've got all these different size pipes and what we have and what we're going to do, and all very confusing if you're not an engineer, which I'm not. So let me ask the general question. We talk about all these specific possibilities of a 100-year storm and a 50-year storm, and et cetera, and the percentages and all that. And I realize that's a free-for-all. But once you've dug down into the soil, and through the structure of the drive of the streets in anybody's property to do any sort of new sewer systems, what is the use of a 15 or a 20-inch sewer when private homes are required to put in 24-inch pipes on their personal property in this community, if I am not mistaken, according to the building code? I have pictures of the home across from me on Bluff, 24-inch sewers going in new construction on private property. I understand that's the building code now.
It varies for every project, Jan. What they're putting that in for is to provide stormwater detention.
Yeah.
And that can be achieved by a number of means, typically with oversized pipe. So you might have short sections of large pipe, a different application. Those aren't for conveyance off of the lot, they're for storage of water on the lot.
That doesn't connect to the city systems?
Ultimately it does, but it connects through much smaller pipe. The idea of stormwater detention with single-family development is to store those 100-year storms, those heavier rainfall events in vaults, in pipe on the property, and release it at a much more controlled rate out to the village's system through smaller pipe. You might have, where that 24-inch pipe is there, that may only be releasing it out to the village's system with a 4-inch or a 6-inch pipe.
Okay.
To control the release.
Nonetheless, and I understand that, but nonetheless, with all the building going on, especially in our area where we are talking right now, within one house of mine, within one house, in one direction or the other, they have built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 houses within one house of mine. Now all of those houses have this 24-inch color retention, if you will, because that's what you're saying. It's a retention, a 24-inch sewer retention that then goes down to a smaller one and feeds into the city system. If all these new homes have all this retention, is it not true that all of that is all rushing at 8 inches or whatever pipe size into the city system and overwhelming it, and it's literally coming back up in Craig's area or in my area, coming back up through the sewers, because the sewers are just totally overloaded. So my question is, why are we being conservative with the size of sewers that we're putting in these areas? It seems like we're being so careful with this 1.3 and this 1.8 million, we're gonna use 15 to 24 or 18 to 30 inch. Can't we just put 30 inches everywhere or even more? Can't we do that once we're down and we're opened up? I understand there's other stuff going on down there, I understand that. But to me, it just doesn't make sense that we would even consider where we now have an 8 inch to potentially put in a 15 inch sewer. I don't know, does that sound silly to anyone else besides me?
Well, Jen, I'll comment briefly, and I'm gonna have Rod speak to it. This same design criteria is what we've applied throughout the village for the last 20 years of stormwater improvements.
Right.
That 100-year capacity. It's not the same size pipe in all applications, but it's the same capacity. So we're here. Yes, it has.
They're all flooded.
Well, but we're addressing your area. I'm talking about areas in the last 20 years that we've installed this type of a level of improvement, and it has worked. And I'm happy to talk with you offline, and we can walk through each and every one of those if you'd like.
Okay.
And then, Rod, I'd like you to speak to the why stop at a 100-year capacity design? Because I think that's at the heart of what she's asking.
Yeah, so again, normally for storm sewer, we try to design it for a 10-year event because storm sewer is very expensive. And so if we can establish a good overland flow route where water can overflow without causing damage, then we don't normally design for larger than a 10-year storm sewer, again, because of that additional cost. In this case, where we can't really establish adequate overland flow routes without major regrading of roads and houses and yards, it's impractical to do that. So we look at the 100-year storm event, which is significantly larger size pipe, significantly larger capacity than that 10-year event. And that's the standard. We have to pick a good standard to use, and that is a really high standard to use. It's well beyond what you would use in a newer community. And as Dave mentioned, all of the projects that we've performed over the last 20 years here in town that have performed really well, including significant rainstorm events, have been designed by that criteria. So, and just because of pipe, so you use the example of an 8-inch going to a 15-inch, that's not nearly a doubling of the capacity. A 15-inch has significantly, we're talking about a round cross-section here, so it has significantly more capacity than an 8-inch pipe does. So even though it might not look like a big difference going from a 10-year storm sewer that's like an 18-inch to a 100-year that might be a 24 or a 30-inch, that's a significant cost, as we see, an increase of about 50% on the project, but it's also a significant increase in capacity. So that's why we use that standard.
Okay, I understand the standard, but for instance, down in the corner of Oak Ridge, you put in a 60-inch sewer.
Right, because that 60 inch is designed for the whole area. Because it's taking flows from the whole area.
I understand that, but that's 60 inches, and it's clearly, the water is clearly not getting to it at this point. Are all these
water's getting
improvements?
to it. And
But not enough
that's
water.
why we don't have the problems that we used to have at this location. But these improvements are going to do a much better job of getting those other areas that are experiencing problems connected into that 60 inch.
So the Sunset Bluff area is going to go all the way over there to the Oak Ridge 60-inch pipes eventually?
Yes, Marty, right, everything connects eventually into the 60 inch.
In that corner right there, the bottom.
Not all of it here, some of it along Fenby Road, some of it along Skokie Ridge, but all of it gets into the 60 inch that then continues over. And if it were effective to put a 60 inch in everywhere, first off, if it were more effective, which it's not necessarily, because if you don't have the flow to fill the pipe, it's not going to fill anyway. And second, we have physical restrictions. A 5-foot diameter pipe in an existing right-of-way that has water main, sanitary sewer, trees, roadway, all of those things. We have very restricted right-of-ways here in Glencoe, and so it was very difficult to make that 60-inch pipe work when that was built, and that's why we don't use 60-inch everything.
I can understand that, but nonetheless, in my little mind, I have issues with only a 15 to 24 inch in the one case, or the 18 to 30. But if you assure us that it's adequate, and we spend almost $2 million, you're going to potentially alleviate, I don't know, can you say 80% of our issues in this area? Can you say that? Can you say 30%?
Well, it's designed to alleviate all of those issues for the 100-year storm, up to the 100-year storm.
Okay. It sounds like a foreign language to us. Okay, I understand it. I have it written down. I understand it, but it's still a foreign language because when you get flooded every single time it rains, which I have for 16 years, just about every single time it rains, and I don't know that my house is even going to be addressed in this case. How long would it take to do these improvements? How long are you potentially?
We typically find with these sorts of improvements is that dollar amount can be constructed within one construction season. Usually you start late spring, early summer, and trying to be complete by the end of the year. Sometimes we've started later in the year for various reasons, and you finish up the next spring. But it's all within a construction season.
So.
If I can just add to that real quickly, we were actually discussing this in the meeting beforehand somewhat, and there's an important consideration that we are working within a timeline regulated by a referendum process. There's design work that needs to be done relative to the specific projects, and we are going to have to take some time to do that design before we can actually construct. So that's the timeline of this is that we are moving very quickly and that we will continue to move very quickly, but we are not quite sure of exactly when specific projects at this moment in time would be constructed if the referendum was approved by voters in April.
Do you have a maximum time?
We would.
3 years?
The last time I raised this, everybody booed, and I didn't mean to be mean. I just don't want people to come back here time after time and say you promised and it's still not fixed, because that serves nobody. So let's step back and go through this. April is the next possible election, and we're working towards getting that on for April.
And we appreciate that. It's very clear you're working on that.
And we discussed in finance trying to do some of the design work now, with the risk that if the referendum fails, we will have spent some significant village money and it'll just be gone. But let's assume that the village of Glencoe will hear this cause and get behind it. Normally you like to do the design over the winter so you can construct in the spring. So if we go to an April referendum and we have design work, then we're finished with the design work as it's getting cold, which is not good. So that's why we might want to try to accelerate the design. The construction work, well, we've got to find a vendor. We're going to have to put a bid package, and people are going to have time to respond to that, because we can't just go hire anybody. It has to be bid. If we get that done in 3 months, that's pretty fast. By the time we publish it, they have a chance to read it, they have a period to assemble their bids, and then we evaluate it. And then we start digging. And so I would say I see no chance of getting this done in 2015. It just isn't going to happen. 2016, yeah.
Well, I would note too that the restrictions on the bond, and others would speak more detail. Once the bonds are issued, we have 2 years in which to spend it, so it won't drag on just by the nature of the funding. And what we've done, the recently completed 2012 bond issuance, we had 3 major projects, and we built those over the course of 2 construction seasons. Here we're going to end up with potentially four significant projects. We cannot build all those in 1 year. It's just not going to. In a village our size, there's a number of factors that would make that difficult. So we'll have to decide how we schedule that in a 2 year construction window. And we're in the early stages of that.
I also want to give everybody feel a little bit better about pipe sizes here. I'm referring to the miracle by memory of pi r squared. If you go from an 8-inch pipe to a 15-inch pipe, it sounds like it's not even twice as big, but the capacity of it is more than 3 times as big.
Missed that class. Okay. One last question. In this preliminary report, you talked about, based on the hydraulic analysis performed, that the staff, approximately 30 homes within this basin area are impacted by roadway flooding and overhead flow through private property. Is it possible to know what 30 homes you're talking about? Is it those dots?
It's those dots.
It is those dots. Okay. So I need to see. I can't.
Anyone out there, really? We're not gonna tell you.
You can't see your home if you want to.
Okay.
Just to let you know, that particular exhibit is not on the website.
That's because we created it for this meeting, and we will post it after this meeting is over. Thank you.
Come on out. He's welcoming us like, yeah.
I'm very glad to hear, though, that people are paying attention to the website.
I think this might be on the second house.
It's not.
On the second house.
I think the yellow dot is the first house?
Yeah,
On the second house. Yeah, because my water comes from Bluff, comes right this way. So it potentially will impact my house. That's my house. Where's your house? Okay. That makes me feel a little better.
Yes, probably or you're not. I'm not that.
But that doesn't mean you're
Right. No, so you're right here. This is Scotia.
Right, this is
The property. Yeah. The yellow is
right away.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, all right, can I have one other question?
It's all part of it. It's all part of it.
If I may, my neighbor who could not make it tonight lives in this curve right here. She is probably this house. Let's see. That's Craig. Okay, there's two houses between you and Christine, Craig? Are there two houses?
Yeah.
So if this is you, this might be Christine with the swimming pool. Are you familiar with that property with the swimming pool in the backyard? I've witnessed their backyard. It's beyond comprehension how much water you get. I assume. So it will.
Probably right that yard.
So ideally this will all help that yard.
The storm sewer on Bluff will help all the yards to the west, where you see all the green and yellow come down. The purpose of the Bluff sewer system here is to eliminate a lot of this overflow. This street ponds overtops, comes down and causes all that, and the purpose of that Bluff system is to
Mr. President, one thing I might offer is that we can, and arguably these exhibits can be a little small and limiting at this meeting. Staff is happy to meet with anybody to go over these slides in greater detail in our office. So if you want to schedule a time following this meeting, please get in touch.
I would like to say thank you to everyone, including the engineers. You're probably working some late nights. I understand that. I have a husband that does the same thing all the time when he's not an engineer. I understand that this is a huge project. It's more than just our area. And I want to thank everyone for their input and their attitude towards helping us out as best you can and as quickly as you can. And I feel that, and it's clearly demonstrated, and I personally want to say thank you. I just, right, it makes.
One thing that I will say, the village board, as much as, we get it and we like to put something before the voters, we don't campaign on that, but if you want to start talking to everybody in Glencoe lining up support, that you're free in a democratic process to ask for the votes that you need to ask for if you want to be sure this is going to pass.
I personally don't think it'll be an issue, but that's my opinion, and I will certainly get that referendum done.
Nobody says we got too many votes.
That's right. That's right. All right.
I have a quick question. My name is Bob Bolster. I live at 1055 Oak Ridge. The east ditch outlet, in 100-year rain, can it take all of the flow from Glencoe?
Rod, you want to answer that? Yeah, we can answer that. Rod will speak to that.
So the question is the east diversion ditch, which is just east of the Skokie Lagoons, where half of the western half of the village of Glencoe drains to that ditch. It's a very flat ditch. It was constructed when they constructed the Skokie Lagoons, and over the years it had silted in significantly, and it had lost a lot of its capacity, and that was backing up flows into areas, including your area and other parts of town. There have been substantial improvements performed on the east diversion ditch over the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, and they have significantly increased the capacity of that, which is, again, what makes projects like this much more effective and much less expensive to exactly do that, to convey flows away from the flooding areas into the ditch.
And just maybe a side comment on that Rod's correct. He's been involved with this for 20 plus years, studying that ditch and designing and preparing a similar report on the ditch that ultimately we were able to get Cook County Forest Preserve to use that design and clean that ditch to the tune of $1 million in 2007. And another important step is we got the county's agreement to allow the village, because we have everything to gain, they have zero, the ability to access and maintain that ditch. And ironically, as we speak this week, we have our contractor in there. We do this about every other season. We walk that ditch from Tower Road up to Dundee and pull out the deadfall and some of the organics and the natural debris in there so that we can continue to maximize the capacity of that ditch.
Even though it's greatly improved, but in a 100-year rain, can it take it?
It has more than 100-year storm capacity. That's not the issue. It's getting the water to the ditch. It's been the problem.
And I think Dave and the gentleman will be happy to reiterate and talk. If you remember when this all started, the village had spent a lot of time getting the improvements to the ditch and putting in that 60-inch pipe that was sized once that was in and taken care of to permit the village to do the engineering to work on the part of the project that you are all here looking at and talking about now. So there's been a long period of time of doing things to make it so that it would be effective when the village worked on the area. And so this study is the next step in moving that forward. I should mention, of course, there are some storms because Mother Nature is more than any of us can possibly cope with, such as part of the May storm. You may recall that the sanitary district pointed out that there is not enough capacity in the entire city metropolitan area of Chicago, and they could not build enough to take care of some of the sanitary flows that they had coming down because it was such a short period of time and so much water it was dumped. It was literally impossible to actually do it. So no one can ever eliminate all flooding. If you can plan, most areas in the state and most villages do not do 100-year planning. When we do the planning that we've been doing and that we've discussed doing in this project to try and bring it all up to the 100-year level, that's a very, very high level, and that's the maximum that one can do. And we probably have more of that than any other village in this entire area, because when we do these projects, we have chosen to do it at the 100-year level so that we can try and eliminate all potential flooding that we can impact. Other questions? Rosemary, did you want to? Go ahead.
You go first.
Thanks.
Stand up there.
Hi, I'm Marcy Pickard. I'm on 1059 Skokie Ridge Drive. My property is north of Sunset. And so my question is, it's not identified on this map by a yellow spot, nor is my neighbors, and I know there are other people on Skokie Ridge north of Sunset that have also been impacted, not in the same way, but have certainly had some flooding. Will this project in any way alleviate the flooding situation north of Sunset?
And it's a great question, and the short answer is yes, it will, because these improvements will provide additional capacity and will also accommodate flows coming from that area. We don't have a lot of yellow dots north of Sunset because we have a very steep slope coming down the the roadways from north to south for the most part. And so most of those flood flows are directed towards the street. I recognize that there are a lot of issues on the private property for the water getting to the street, but the public system itself has adequate capacity within the storm sewers and the overflow routes to get the water down here. But there are certainly a lot of residential private property drainage problems throughout the area up there. As I said before, these improvements will at least provide some additional capacity that you can do private property improvements to individually alleviate those problems. But the modeling doesn't show the public system as being overwhelmed in those areas. And it's mostly because it's got such a steep slope.
I have one follow-up question. In the recent, like the spring times, we had a situation where we had the intake that would go to the public system was just at capacity. And there was people were saying like the system was at capacity, there was nowhere for the water to go. And then there was a moment when there was this like incredible like opening up and sudden drainage. Did that have anything to do with the size of these pipes, or where was that blockage in the system that taking the water out of my property?
So sometimes because these are complicated systems and we're dealing with Mother Nature, and she doesn't dump rain in one even pattern all over the area, and it might rain really intensely here and less intensely there, and the nature of how water is getting into that system, how water is coming from this area versus how it's coming down this area, it affects the timing of those systems. And you're right, if there isn't capacity in the system to accept flows from the private property, then it's going to stay on the private property until that capacity is there. So these improvements are designed to provide that additional capacity so that it doesn't stay on private property as long. And if you do individual improvements to connect to that, it ought to help reduce not eliminate, but reduce the flood.
And it may be that the best way to answer those questions is for you to make an appointment with Dave, so you can look at the map, see what these improvements are, and then determine with respect to your neighbors and things, are there ways that their property is configured or yours or whatever that cause the water to pond in those areas where we may have been able to provide the opportunity, if you get it to the street, to move it away. It may relate to what you and your neighbors do, whether you actually get it to the street as opposed to have flooding. And so Dave can help you if you contact the Public Works and make an appointment and come in and look at this and discuss that and have a better feel for what are private improvements that need to be done to get the water to the public system and what is going to be the impact of what the village is discussing putting in.
Two quick questions. I'm Pete Colgrove, across the street from RC and 6 Can I point something out here? I guess I got one question. Is this the first time that ours drainage area has been reviewed by your company or any other companies? This is the first time we've ever actually looked at this?
No.
We looked at the drainage basin in 2002, and that precipitated the Oak Ridge Drive storm sewer, the 60-inch that we're talking about.
I guess when I was looking at this, thanks for providing this online, and it seems like pretty straightforward math. I'm just trying to figure out how 15 inches and 8 inches going into an 8-inch pipe, so 23 inches into an 8-inch pipe didn't really raise a lot of alarms in the past. Right here at Skokie and in the Sunset.
We believe we have that condition exists in other areas of the village. There's no great explanation for how it arrived at that point. I guess the answer is we've slowly been picking off these projects, over the course of 15, 20 years.
Okay. And then kind of a little bit on Marcy's point, is there, what level, and maybe you can speak this, Rod, what level of maintenance goes into this sort of thing, and how much does maintenance play into these drains? I mean, my kid throws a 6-inch frisbee into that drain system in the 8, we're all done. So, obviously, I don't have a 24-inch frisbee, but what part does the village or the maintenance come into play with these systems? Does it come into play, in that?
Sure, yeah. Maintenance is a critical component of any storm sewer or sanitary sewer system. You've got a pipe with a certain capacity located underground, and anything you do to block that capacity is going to have problems or cause problems upstream. So within the pipe, it's really important to keep that clean and maintained, that your son doesn't play frisbee next to the storm drain, and also, especially the storm drain itself on the surface. This time of year we tend to get a lot of leaves, and as those leaves accumulate, especially in low areas, if that's keeping the water from getting into the system, then all of that capacity isn't being used, and you get surface flooding. So those are two critical elements of maintenance. But maintenance is a really important part of any of these systems.
And that responsibility, Pete, of that public system, both the sanitary and the storm sewer, is the villages. And we've got a sewer division that has crews on the street virtually every day of the year, other than the dead of winter.
And I would also mention that you have to remember, as we were talking about at the outset, most of the system was put in the 1920s. So we have all over the village areas where you have, say, an 8-inch pipe or other anomalies. And for the past 20 years, the village has been involved in a very strong program of trying to go through and determine what is the worst situation. So it doesn't make you feel any better that we've eliminated a lot of situations that were worse than yours, but it should make you feel then those people should be supportive of the corrections to the system that you face, and getting rid of the pipe and putting in the properly sized pipe to handle what I would call the class 1 type storm that dumps 4.9 inches of water in a 3-hour period. So there's a lot that goes into it, and the reason that we're where we are, that we can address these and hopefully get the public to support the bond issues, is unlike Winnetka, who's waited about 20 years to start on theirs and is talking about spending $60 or $100 million in a short period of time. We've been chipping away at it and working at it very carefully to try and do something that would help all the residents of the village, including you. Other questions, Maria?
I'm Rosemary Spiro. I live at 995 Skokie Ridge Drive. First and foremost, thank you for listening. Thank you for moving on it so quickly. And thank you for setting up this meeting. This is actually very important, the last one and this one. Having said that, I've gone through this report and a lot of questions. I am the person who's impacted the most. I live at the corner of Dundee and Skokie Ridge. I'm the person who lives in the house that, even with all these changes, is going to get the water in front of their house. And our street is the street that floods regularly. So I want to follow up on some of the things you mentioned, some of the things Craig mentioned. Let's go to alternate number 2. And I want to understand this because you didn't bring it up in your presentation, but then you did as Craig spoke with you. In alternate number 2, you're suggesting or proposing putting in a 24-inch pipe where currently there's nothing. There's nothing going. There is no sewer pipe taking the water from where you see, where everyone sees the 2 red lines coming together. Right there, there's an island of sorts. And that's where it all floods.
There is a storm sewer. It's an 8-inch storm sewer, and it runs to the north.
Right. So what you're trying to do is get water to flow north and upward, and then it hits like a wall underground, from what I understand from some of the village people. And then we're trying to make it move so it's northeast, and then we're trying to make it move, we gotta divert it to go northwest. That to me is a problem.
That's the existing condition.
No, I understand that, and that's the existing condition, and I see that. And we gotta go back to alternate number 2, 100-year. Okay, so I understand that's what we have now, and that's a huge problem. When you put in, you're proposing to put in a 24-inch sewer pipe, correct? Okay. when you do that, what will happen to the water that currently is flowing north and then northeast and then hopefully will somehow get northwest?
Well, again.
Here, you can look at me, that's kind of hard.
Well, if I can, we've got flow coming from the north.
Right.
The idea is to intercept much of that flow with this 24-inch before it gets directed down here. We have flow coming from the east, flowing through rear yards, down Dundee Road, and it gets there.
Right, my house gets it on both ends.
No, I understand that. And the idea is to intercept that flow here through this very substantial system and run it along so that it goes west along Dundee Road instead of going into the into Skokie Ridge. And then third, we're running a 24-inch pipe from that same system up to the low point so that we're picking up flow, so rather than having to go through an 8-inch northeast, northwest, and then southwest again, it would simply go straight out to Dundee Road and into the 60s.
So the water,
much more direct route.
but the water that's not picked up by the 24-inch pipes going on Sunset and not picked up by the 24/30 coming down Bluff is going to be supposedly be picked up by the 24 new pipe put in on Skokie Ridge, mid-street, leading into Dundee.
Right, but also it's important to point out that we're not getting rid of the existing storm sewer.
No, I understand that. I understand it. So we're still going to have somewhat, and this is what I don't get. You're still, what water is going to be coming through the 24-inch sewer pipe if you are still going to divert the water up northeast and then over and up northwest? Is this 24-inch sewer pipe supposed to just drain or take away the water from Skokie Ridge Drive?
The 24-inch is designed to accept the flows that aren't otherwise intercepted and will continue to come down to that location.
That's what I thought.
It's a depressional area, so you know it's lower than everything around it.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure that you're providing some positive outlet for that depression.
So on that point, where you installed the 60-inch sewer pipe just over, that's not on a street, that is between homes, correct, or underground, but it's not.
The 60-inch does run between homes.
Then why would we only put in a 24-inch on Skokie Ridge Drive, accepting water from at least 3, if not 4 streets, but have a 60-inch sewer pipe accepting water from mostly Oak Ridge Drive and then some coming off?
So the 60-inch accepts flow from nearly this entire tributary area.
Right, but now it's going to come.
The 24-inch will just be accepting flows once this is built and this is built, primarily from this area.
But if,
it's a much smaller area.
But if that doesn't work, then it's stuck again. And that's a big problem. I know it's a big problem for me. I know it's a big problem for Mrs. Romer. I know it's a big problem for Craig. And it's probably going to be a big problem for the people who live just across the street. And it's not gonna, what I'm worried about is exactly what everyone else is saying. It makes no sense to put in a 24-inch. I'm glad we're putting something in.
So maybe I can answer it this way. The 24-inch is designed to meet the same standard that 60-inch was designed for. The exact same standard.
Okay, so then let's go back to something else you said earlier, which was back in May. Back in May, the May 2012 rain. It was a 15-year storm event, right? 3.4 inches in 5 hours. Yet
at the gauge, that would have been
our street was entirely flooded. But that was a 15-year storm event. And so my concern is this isn't, the 24-inch isn't going to be sufficient. That's point number 1. Point number 2, coming off of Elm Street, you can't really see the size of, some of them are 8-inch still. There's 21, there's 8-inch, and I'm not sure if it's 8-inch on one side of Elm Ridge Drive and 21 on, look here on your report. We have 8-inch on this side, 18-inch on that side, and then they come into a 21. I think that's the house that.
So that's running right here. 8-inch.
Correct. How come you're not addressing making that 8-inch larger? Because over here, if we were to look at this, this one here has a 24 inch. And I know these are detailed questions, but, and I'm happy to do this later, but some of this is really important because
Sure.
this
I can
section
answer that.
is.
So that, we're not necessarily having to replace the storm sewer with larger storm sewer because we are diverting flow that used to be tributary to that, and now it's gonna run here, it's gonna run here. So it's going to have less flow into that pipe, and that is alleviating much of the burden on that pipe so that the 8-inch and the 18-inch together do have capacity to take a much smaller drainage area that's going to be tributary to it. So it is benefiting from these improvements without necessarily replacing that individual pipe.
I guess I have a question for you, because I really want you to be happy here.
I like my street number.
Well, I know, and really, I'm
I'd
pulling.
like Zena not to have to worry
Yeah,
about anything or-
I'm pulling for you.
Yeah.
So the thing that's bothering me is your concern that the engineering solution is not the right engineering solution.
Only because just halfway down the block, there's a 60-inch pipe. And that's not even on a street. We have a street here where almost every single rainflow, one of us is going out
Yeah, well,
to go check whether there's a kid
and that's
stuck
all.
in the car.
That's just awful. It's just awful. The engineers that model this, and their model says this works, and and anybody that's been wet time again is I understand if you're skeptical, but our engineers saying, they got the topography, they get the pipes, they got the rate of rainflow, they can simulate the whole thing under extreme conditions, and based on those extreme conditions, this is the solution.
Okay.
But you don't believe it.
Well, with all due respect, if we were to go back to the 1990, 1997, 2002 reports, my street, Skokie Ridge Drive, ended up with no sewer system. What happened then?
I can't answer that. I can't answer that because it's long before my time up here.
Same here. I wasn't even, I didn't live here. But my point is, having gone through the reports, the preceding reports, that makes me wonder. So that's the reason why I'm just trying to understand, and I do, by the way, understand your equation about
Pi r squared.
So I get that.
One
But
tidbit from geometry
If you were
class.
to do that equation, then why stick with a 24-inch on a street that is that street is constantly being used as an alternate to get from Green Bay to Dundee, and the 60-inch pipe isn't even under a street.
I guess if I understand his answer is his model shows that's what it takes to make this work.
And I would comment, Ms. Spiro, that as said previously, that 60-inch and the 24-inch, you're talking about different size drainage areas into those. They both are designed to the same criteria. The 60-inch, as we said earlier, was designed in 2002 to be able to handle what at the time was a much more major problem at the bottom end of Oak Ridge Drive there, much more severe than what's occurring on Skokie Ridge. You don't see it today because that water is in that 60-inch pipe. But it was also designed and sized to be able to handle this future improvement that we're talking about here. So that 60-inch is not simply designed to handle that small area of Skokie Ridge you're referring to, which is, as Rod pointed out, is probably 4 times the drainage basin area that will ultimately drain to that 24-inch. It's all a factor of the area that is draining.
Will it drain 4 feet of water that
Yes,
we
it
get
will.
every single time?
This
4
exhibit,
feet, not 2 feet, not 1 foot, a
this
minimum of 4
this
feet.
exhibit reflects, if you looked at the earlier exhibit where we showed those flooding limits, this exhibit shows what happens to those flooding limits with this level of improvement. So with this pipe in there, you don't see any of those areas anymore. So it's all that water, this system can accommodate all that water that's now ponding on the roadway.
Excuse me, from what you're saying, we're not gonna hit 4 feet of water, because it's gonna be offset through the other system, the bluff and something.
Exactly, but her point was, is this gonna solve the water that's flooding in that lower area? Yes, it will.
Because we have the perfect storm right here.
Yes, it will.
We have the eddy that builds up and cars can't go through, and, it's just 30 years of this.
We're here in 2014 talking about it.
I know.
Another question for you is why use 30-inch on half of Grundy and then leading into 60? When the 30-inch area is taking quite a bit of rainfall, why are you using half the size?
Okay, so the question is, why is this a 30-inch if this is a 60-inch? And it's the same answer. The tributary area to the 30-inch, even though it's a long section of pipe to get it to here, the tributary area is essentially here, right? It doesn't really pick up much more flow until it gets here, and then it becomes a 36-inch because it's picking up your additional flow.
Actually, on here it still says 30.
Is it a 30?
Yeah, you don't change. Just go from 30 to 60.
Okay. So, but again, that's designed to take this flow. The 60-inch is designed for this whole area here. So, and again, as I said before, it's designed to the same criteria. We don't just, we're talking right now about pipe diameter, but capacity is also determined by pipe slope. And so if we have that 60 inches is, unfortunately, much of it is on a relatively flat slope because it has to drain to the east diversion ditch. These pipes up here are very steep slopes, so a smaller pipe can accommodate more flow on a steeper slope. We actually have a lot more grade coming off of Dundee to the east than we do to the west. So this is designed to convey the 100-year event for the tributary area.
Another question, on the sidewalk, not just by my house, but further, the entire yellow one. When you start at Skokie Ridge going northbound the bluff, there are a couple of drains on the sidewalk. Will you be adding more? Are you recommending?
No. But those were put in a short-term effort, try to capture some of that. That'll all be replaced by the capacity of the 30-inch storm sewer. But those are very minor in the big picture.
And if we have additional questions, because my sense is it's 9 o'clock, should I just make an appointment this week?
Absolutely.
What I will ask is if you don't get the answers you need, you let us know. I think they'll be able to help you with this.
I have all my questions.
And
it isn't just for me.
No, I know, and I know why you.
It's dry. I don't have the issue that most of these people have. I just happen to be the voice because my house is the fortunate house that gets it on both ends, and I can't get out of my driveway. And then I'm watching these people sandbag their driveways, and kids can't get to school, and on and on and on. We can't get out of our house.
I gotta say, all of us, if we were out shopping for another house, would be looking at a new angle, not just how pretty is the kitchen, but all of this stuff that everybody's learned about home ownership the hard way. We would be asking a lot more questions and none of us did. I mean, I didn't.
No, but now we have that opportunity, and that's why I said thank you before. And that's the reason I'm very curious, first, why there wasn't a storm sewer put on Skokie Ridge. Let's leave that alone. We're not going to go there. Second, if we have one 60-inch pipe or sewer pipe, and we're installing a 24-inch, there are 75 acres. Maybe we should, I'd like to know if there's a larger area where there is the same 24 and 60. I mean, I have a bunch of other questions.
Mrs. Spiro, we will meet and talk about every one of your questions, but we're not going to convince you tonight that that 24 is the right size, so we will do that at another time.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Any other questions?
May I please speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It's been a long meeting. I'm Gail Ear, and I live at 1054 Bluff Road in Glencoe. I'm not one of the green dots on the map tonight, thank goodness, I guess. But we did flood this spring. We had 2 inches of sewer water in our basement. Never before. So my questions tonight are this. I'm very interested in seeing that referendum pass. But I'm not sure that the language that we used in the engineering report tonight is what's really going to help us. The 5-year, the 10-year, the 100-year. Really what's going to happen, I hope, is climate change. Because the 100-year happens now. So I'm asking that the language, when we go forth with the referendum, pick up some of the subtleties. Okay, that was my first point. The second point I have is it has to do with the financing and the budgeting of all of this. We're going to hopefully have the referendum. We're going to build a new sewer system. At the same time, though, it's going to take a period of time to do that. And I'm concerned about maintenance of the existing sewers while we do that. It was 3 years before our sewer was pumped out and rotted this time, and that's what caused some of that's what caused our flood. So I'd like to be sure going forward that the existing inadequate pipes are rotted. Can we have some talk about that? And then the last thing that I wanted to mention in all of this financial discussion is there was some talk of rebate. So let me just say, quite candidly, this 2-inch flood cost me $20,000 in my basement, and that doesn't cover the backflow container thing I have to put in next spring. So I realize, I mean, this is my village too, and I am concerned about the finances of it all. So could we have just a little closing commentary on financing all of this?
Well, as the finance chair, I felt that we had very strong village board support. The support was for the more comprehensive solution. We're just receiving this report tonight, but I would imagine, my expectation is it will be on in April. There are a few other things that the village needs to buy as well. And I won't go into those now, but we need those too. So we are going to ask the voters for their support. The last time we went for a stormwater referendum, it got huge support. I mean, it passed by a huge margin, but as I said, go call your friends. Don't call your friends that live in the same neighborhood you do. They're already all for this. Call the people who live in the other parts of town and make your case.
Thank you.
And I have some questions. Dave, she was saying that the pipes backed up into her basement, which sound like sanitary sewers.
That's correct.
As opposed to stormwater.
Yes.
So that's a different issue.
Yeah, and speaking to the maintenance, we've got 55 miles of sanitary sewer in town. There are segments that don't routinely give us the same problems that others do, and so we aren't in every lineal foot of every sanitary sewer in town every year. And it just so happened that 1,000 block of Bluff had not historically been a problem, as evidenced by the testimony of Mrs. Eater that they hadn't had problems. And we ultimately did find we had debris in that line that was not organic, was not part of the sanitary sewer system. We got that out of there. We feel like we have that problem solved, at least for that segment. But point well taken. I mean, we have certain hot spots in town, both the sanitary and the storm, that are on our regular maintenance schedule, where we're doing them multiple times a year. Where others we can afford to do that every year or every other year. But as I said earlier, our sewer maintenance division is on the street every day of the year.
Do you have any other questions, Mrs. Elder? Do you have any other questions that we should address?
No, I think she's through. I think if the board is ready, we can move to our second area, yep, which hopefully be as interesting as the first.
Right. Let's move to Madison Avenue.
Let's do it again.
Now we know hide our squares.
I should mention as we go into this that I do think as we go through this, we need to talk more in terms of the different classes of storms and be talking about a storm event that drops 4.9 inches of water within 3 hours, and that is the year of the designation confuses everybody. It creates that type of issue. I'm sure with the borrowers it won't be any more popular than it is with the residents that are here. And when you get down to talking about size of pipe, we're talking about amount of drainage and time. And it has nothing to do with whether we've attached some sort of question of whether it happens twice in a year or 4 times in a year. It has to do with the amount of rainfall at a given time over 3 opportunities. And so we really
Mr. President, Rod, maybe before you start, could we see a show of hands? Who's here from the Madison watershed area? Anyone? Okay, well, we'll run through this for the board's sake, but we may be able to be a little briefer on the explanation.
So the Madison Avenue watershed, as I said at the beginning, it's a much smaller tributary area. It really only has 2 distinct sub-basins within it. It's a total of a little over 8 total acres tributary. What we have along Madison Avenue between Greenwood and, is that Vernon?
Yeah.
Between Greenwood and Vernon, we have a depressional area, quite a depressional area, right in the middle of the block. And this is actually at the upper end of what we would call the Greenwood drainage basin. Goes south on Greenwood, eventually makes its way out to the east diversion district. It's quite a distance downstream. Normally we don't see this sort of flooding at the upper end of the drainage area, but because we have this local depression area, we have water coming from the 8 acres down Greenwood from both directions and ponding here in the middle. On Madison, sorry. When that water ponds, you can see that the 2-year storm is represented by the red, and it's contained within the right-of-way, but it's a little shy of 2 feet deep. So that's a significant problem to have that much water in your street. It limits passenger vehicles going through as well as emergency vehicles. And then shortly after the 2-year storm event, we overflow to the south so that the 10, 50, and 100-year event, and I apologize, I'd love to call them category 1, 2, and 3 or something like that, but it is the terminology that the field uses. And those more intense storms, once the capacity of the storage in the street is exceeded, go right directly towards this home, between the yards, and back out to Greenwood, and then it continues south. Now, this is a little bit wrong in that you'd still have water in the street going south. We have very small storm sewers draining this area, and it's not just this tributary area that exceeds their capacity, but we also have positive drainage down the streets, except in this area. So it flows down the streets, it doesn't go into the yard, so we don't consider it to be necessarily such a problem to the south here. But it is there. In this case, for the 2-year event, we have 6 homes, and the total of 13 homes affected were shown in yellow dots on that last exhibit. We have 6 homes impacted for the 2-year, and then we very quickly have 13 for both the 10, or for each of the 10, 50, and 100-year events. Because again, it's gone over the curb and into the yard. We again looked at 2 levels of protection, and we have 2 alternatives for the 100-year level of protection, but for the 10-year level of protection, this is a little more complicated as to how this would work because of the lack of existing storm sewer capacity in the whole general area. But we would propose to install a 15-inch to replace a 10-inch on the north side or south side. We actually have one 10-inch on the north and one on the south. We would replace one of those with a 15-inch diameter storm sewer, and then install a new 15-inch diameter storm sewer down Greenwood, where it would have to connect into a smaller storm sewer, probably right over in this area. But we would design the structure where that connection would take place to take an overflow, again, into the street to the same location that it's always gone in the past. The primary difference being up to the 10-year storm would not go through these yards, it would go through the storm sewer and then down the street. The 100-year alternative simply increases the size of portions of that storm sewer. Again, it's shown in yellow, it doesn't show up very well here, But it starts again as a 15-inch, but it increases in size, I believe, to an 18 and then a 24 going to the south. That would provide a 100-year or 1% level of protection for the same area. Now, we also had recognized that we had the opportunity to potentially put in detention storage in order to capture some of that ponding. And sometimes, if you can store the water either underground or above ground, you can decrease the size or the extent of the storm sewer that you need in order to provide that same level of protection. In this particular case, we would install a 48-inch diameter storm sewer along Madison Avenue that would connect back into a much smaller storm sewer. The purpose would be to store that excess stormwater. But even with a 48-inch, which would be very difficult to fit into this very limited right-of-way, we find that for the 100-year storm, we continue to pond in the street. We would also have to change the sidewalk elevation to contain that ponding, but that ponding in a 100-year storm would go up to above 2 feet. Yeah, so it would continue to be a problem. And then another problem with this alternative is that, again, we have the ponding, but it would take a long time for that to drain down because we've got all this storage going into very small pipes, and it just takes a long time to get it out of there. So those three alternatives, the 10-year design is about a $570,000 cost. The 100-year level of protection is not nearly as substantial of an increase because we're not as extensive as we are with the storm sewer on the Skokie Ridge project. That would increase cost to $620,000. And that third alternative, which doesn't appear very feasible here, is actually the most expensive at $770,000 also. So,
come to the chase, I would assume you recommend the straight 100-year. To cut to the chase, you recommend the straight 4.9-inch per 3 hour solution.
Yes.
Or class 1.
And that would eliminate those 13, alleviate those 13 properties.
Any questions, anyone? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was so much faster. First one.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
you. The next issue before us has to do with the discussion of the proposal for reconstruction of the Ravine Bluffs waiting station. And the question of whether we should receive a preliminary report to look at this more in the future. And I believe we have.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'll give a brief introduction and then I'll introduce our presenter. This item is on your agenda tonight. This waiting station for the former North Shore Electric Line, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, was built in 1917, demolished in 1955, and was rediscovered in the mid-90s by historians who follow Wright's work. In 2003, a movement led by residents of the Ravine Bluffs Association was initiated to reconstruct this Wright-designed waiting station at its original location. That project stalled in late 2005 due to the contractor who initially had offered to build that and donate his costs withdrawing, and then existing economic conditions halted alternative fundraising endeavors. So the project has remained dormant until this past year. Renewed interest in reconstructing the waiting station has emerged with a proposal from the Glencoe Historical Society as part of their year-long celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Ravine Bluff subdivision. Staff has met with representatives on and off for several months, most recently at the end of October, to review their proposal in advance of scheduling this matter for the board tonight. At this time, and we'll hear from them tonight, the Glencoe Historical Society is seeking conceptual approval for the project from the board, which is essential for the project to move forward and for the Historical Society to commence fundraising. There are a number of steps that this will follow, and the village attorney can help guide the board through that process. But with that, I would introduce Adam Steinbeck, who's here, along with three other members of the Historical Society board, and to give a brief presentation. Adam.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. I'm Adam Steinbeck, representing Glencoe Historical Society. I'm on the board there. I'm our treasurer, and along with these folks on the board, I'm also co-chair of our Frank Lloyd Wright Centennial Committee. So, thank you. Do I just ask you to advance? Okay, so we're talking about a former waiting station that is adjacent to the Ravine Bluff subdivision. The Glencoe Historical Society is going to talk about a proposal to reconstruct it. We're just going to take not too much time to run through the following agenda, a background on the situation, what we're doing for the centennial celebrating Frank Lloyd Wright in Glencoe 100 years, a little history of the waiting station, the significance, the rationale and precedent for why we're proposing this, and then some more specifics on the proposal. A little bit of background. On the right is a map of Ravine Bluffs, and at the bottom here is where the waiting station is. The Ravine Bluff subdivision was developed in 1915 by architect Frank Lloyd Wright and landscape architect Jens Jensen for Sherman Booth, who was Frank Lloyd Wright's attorney and also a president of the Glencoe Park District. Ravine Bluffs is comprised of 15 acres between Meadow and Sylvan, and also Franklin Roads are the boundaries. There are 6 houses and a cottage on Franklin Road. There are 3 entrance monument markers, and there is 1 bridge, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those other elements briefly later.
The notes on the right, where's that from? It's not your archives, is it?
It was developed by
Karen's helping me that it was developed by an author of an article who had referenced this. I can get the specific footnote information. I don't have it on me right now. Sorry. The waiting station was built, we believe, approximately 1917. It was for the former North Shore Electric Line, and it's located again here, just north of Maple Hill Road, at Inner Green Bay Road, and immediately east of the current Green Bay Trail. Why are we talking about this? As David introduced, it was talked about from 2003 to 2006. Economic conditions had put those discussions on pause. We're talking about this again now in 2014 and for 2015 because at the Glencoe Historical Society we have launched just recently a year-long celebration of the centennial of Frank Lloyd Wright in Glencoe with the 1915 development of Ravine Bluffs. As part of this program, it's a larger program than just talking about the waiting station. We've begun already a series of lecture programs at the library. We have plans for some family programs at the Park District. At the Glencoe Historical Society Museum on Park Avenue, we'll be launching a new exhibit in the spring. We're working on a public art program that will come about next year as well. A book, a house walk of many of the homes in the fall of next year, and then finally the reconstruction of the waiting station. So this proposal is in this larger context of all these various activities. A little bit more on the waiting station history. Been built in 1917, we believe demolished in 1955, which gave it a 30-year life and service until the train line was discontinued. Now the Green Bay Trail runs along that old train bed. Again, in 2003 through 2006, there was a reconstruction proposal led by and put forth by the Ravine Bluffs Association. It had the support of us at Glencoe Historical Society, support from the Glencoe Historic Preservation Commission, and also the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. Architect Scott Javor right here drew architectural plans to execute this project. There was a builder who had pledged the costs and services to rebuild it on the land owned by the Village of Glencoe. But then, unfortunately, shortly prior to a planned formal village board presentation in 2006, it was canceled due to economic conditions that were brewing and, kind of relieving just passed.
May I ask a question? And you were the right people as the Historical Society people. In 1955, they demolished this. Do we have any records of discussion why they, I mean, come on, frankly, right. Well, why not?
Actually, we're not sure about the demolition date. We're still trying to zero in on that. The last electric line, train, the last train was July of 1955. The village didn't actually buy the property until almost 10 years later. So the demolition actually occurred sometime between the last train and the purchase.
But somewhere in a minute, somebody said, I know what, it's the Frank Lloyd Wright thing, let's knock it down.
Well, actually, at the time, I mean, at the time they, this came up as part of the research of Carla Lynch, who's a Wright expert, in her book called Lost Right. And she actually did research and had to kind of persuade people that this wasn't a right design building. But with the help of the Frank Lloyd Wright archives, that has been pretty much firmly established. So it's possible that when it was demolished, they didn't realize what they were destroying.
One can only hope.
Indeed. And to that point, we would like to, why do we want to do this? I guess they didn't appreciate it in the 50s as much as we do now, perhaps, but we believe that it contributes very much to Glencoe's notable historic and architectural character. It is part of our Frank Lloyd Wright collection, if you will, which includes the third largest concentration of Frank Lloyd Wright structures anywhere in the world, after Oak Park in the city of Chicago. We have this very unique Frank Lloyd Wright subdivision, which has a character unto itself of an assemblage of 6 or 7 homes that is unique among Wright developments. We have the only Frank Lloyd Wright designed bridge ever built, albeit a replica now since 1985. There were only 2 Frank Lloyd Wright railroad structures ever built, and this in Glencoe is one of them. Of course, we have our 3 monument markers at the Ravine Bluffs entrance and kind of defining its borders. And this would also complement the historic landmark in town of the railroad depot that is used, that was designed by notable architect Frost, and is a designated landmark in town. So the rationale and precedent, again, commemorates the distinctive history of 100 years of Frank Lloyd Wright in Glencoe. This pays tribute to not only Frank Lloyd Wright, who's an internationally regarded architect, but Sherman Booth and Jens Jensen, the notable landscape architect. And Jens Jensen, again, was notable in Glencoe and beyond as, among other things, one of the presidents of our park district. It would provide a rest stop for community residents and users of the Green Bay Trail. It will be available for educational and informational displays for Glencoe Historical Society, the village, and other community organizations. We believe that it goes a long way to honor the architectural landmarks and heritage of not only the whole village, but the Ravine Bluff subdivision in which it neighbors. It's the village is very graciously right now undertaking a project to restore the 3 markers, and this is consistent with those efforts. It's also consistent with the reconstruction of the bridge that occurred in 1985, which was excellent. And this, of course, completes the effort that was stalled in 2006, which had widespread support to reconstruct this grading station. So, specifically, the proposal tonight, as Dave had pointed out, is that the Glencoe Historical Society respectfully requests that the Village of Glencoe Board of Trustees approve a motion that was in the packet. In short, the motion directs GHS to work with the village staff, complete a concept plan for board review in early 2015. I'm sorry, directs the staff. You're correct, thank you. The plan would include our fundraising plan, cost estimates for the operations, the legal instruments necessary to effectuate this project, village staff project time estimates that would be assisted, and the operational plan for the building going forward. The approval of the motion would also allow us, toward the end of this year now, to commence in a kicking off the capital campaign with donors so that we may raise the funds for the funding of the construction to build the building. Next slide.
Question. Is there a thought to put restroom facilities in there?
There is a thought, yes.
Okay. I want to hear from staff about maintenance. Obviously, with the restroom facility, the maintenance responsibilities.
That's very good question. Yeah, that's part of what we've been talking about and what we need to work through.
I would mention there's also the legal questions that relate to what goes on, what happens there, etc. So the concept is, as I understand it, for staff to work with them to develop a conceptual plan so we can look at all of those issues and decide whether we think that would be appropriate.
Including public safety. So.
Yeah. The staff is certainly already starting to put together some thoughts relative to that. We met with representatives of the Historical Society at the end of October and started to lay out some of those concerns relative to some of the points that had come up the last time around, and we will continue to do that, and that's part of the report that will come back to the board.
Could I ask a question? In the slides that you went through, I didn't see a mention, which was in our materials, which said it could be combined with the unnamed triangular park. Is there a reason why that was left out? Is that not being considered anymore? Or
it's still being considered. It's a bit of a separate issue, but you're right. There is a adjacent park. This, by the way, is a mock-up of what it might look like, if and when it's built. And just to the northeast of the building is a Jens Jensen design park and hardscape that is a circular ring. And yes, part of the discussions may include incorporating that landscape architecture into the building architecture and putting them together.
Which would have to be coordinated with the park.
Right.
Right. But it's intended as the council maybe can sort of this trademark.
I mean, my only thought, for what it's worth, which is not much, is I'm not, based upon my own use and the use I've seen of others of the Green Bay Trail, I'm not that convinced a lot of people would use it if that was its only function. But I could imagine if it were also sort of combined with the park that you would have a larger populace that might in fact use the building in some fashion. So that was why I asked.
Good point.
Any other questions? May I have a motion?
I just want you all to know my great uncle is rolling in his grave.
Why is that?
You knocked it down?
His name was Edwin Sincere. He was with Al Schiller and Sincere. They did Am Shalom, among other things. He was a classmate of Frank Wright. He was not a classmate of Frank Lloyd Wright. They had a competitive thing going. And for him to know that a lot of years later we're going to reinstate Frank Wright's work causes him to be rolling in his grave.
Is that Frankie Wright?
You gotta go see the Writers Theater play that. Joel?
Wrong, right?
Are you a Writers Theater subscriber? You saw the play, but yeah, it's like, why did one guy get famous and the other guy is just kind of faded into the mists?
Well, the motion is to determine whether doing this is right or wrong.
Well, I move to direct staff to work with the Glencoe Historical Society to prepare a preliminary concept plan for the board's review at a meeting in early 2015.
Second.
For roll call, please.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon. Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I like the idea you're trying to squeeze it in before year end, and you can use the village and Dave Clark. You don't need a 501c3, although you probably have one. But you don't need it if you don't want it. They'll run the books, and he does commodities and hedges, and usually it works.
Horses.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Adam. Okay.
That's a historical technical.
That's right.
All right, the next order of business is consideration of a contract with Suburban Elevator for the Village Hall elevator controller and cylinder replacement for $73,029 or $299. And Dave, you were going to give us a little
Yes, very briefly. The Village Hall was remodeled in 1994, and at that point we put in the first elevator. One thing we've learned this year is that the elevator cylinder and controller has a 20-year lifespan. They both went within about a month of each other. We sought competitive bids through the assistance of our elevator inspection consultant who does work throughout the area. Suburban, who happens to perform our current maintenance on the elevator, was the low bid. Staff recommends their bid along with a 10% contingency for any unforeseen issues, and recommends the board authorize the manager to execute a contract with Suburban Elevator of East ND for the Village Hall elevator controller and cylinder replacement for a total cost, including a 10% contingency of $73,299. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just have one brief one. Is this a full bring back, or is it just a makeshift situation?
No, the rest of the carriage and all the infrastructure is in good shape. What we've learned is these are components of an elevator system that wear out and have to be replaced.
So this will be in the capital plan 20 years from now, with replacement.
I will see that.
Okay.
Somebody.
We won't be here, but you will.
I will guarantee it'll be on the plan.
Great.
Any other questions? May I have a motion?
I so move.
Second?
Roll call.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
All right, Dave Clark is on deck to give us a quick review of the preliminary fiscal year 2016 budget and preliminary 2014 tax levy.
I'm going to jump in front of Dave, and then I'm going to let him take it. We started this conversation during the Finance Committee meeting earlier this evening relative to the preliminary draft fiscal year 2016 budget. A series of things that we started to talk through. Dave can walk us through a relatively quick or not quick presentation depending on the board's preference, but this is really the kickoff point for the budget process, and is starting at its normal time, but with a bit more information at this date than we normally have. And so with that, I'll kick it to Dave to walk through a bit of the presentation we didn't get through downstairs, and answer whatever questions the board may have as well related to the tax levy, which the board is scheduled to hold a public hearing on at the December 18th board meeting. And so Dave has some information relative to the tax levy as well for board review.
If I can comment on the question of whether how deeply we dive into this now. I've been on the Finance Committee a long time, and what I've seen was many years ago, the minimum quorum of 3 members of the Finance Committee was all we got, and now it's become a place effectively where all trustees attend and participate in those discussions. We don't take any votes, but in terms of really diving into this budget and discussing the issues, I think we're doing that in finance. I don't know that I think that this forum is where we want to do that. You know, unless anybody feels differently, I think we hit the highlights here and vote here, but the detailed review of issue by issue is a Finance Committee subject.
We can walk through the tax levy information if you'd like.
Let's run.
Let's run.
Okay, the slides are coming out.
Coming out.
And the handout was also given out at the Finance Committee meeting tonight. This is a table that we have available for the property tax levy, basically showing the comparison of the 2013 extended taxes to the proposed tax levy. The proposed tax levy for the village subtotal, excluding for basically tax cap purposes, is 2.58%, or $234,024. Absent an estimate for new property, the increase is actually 1.5%, which is the extension limitation for the 2014 levy. The amount included for the police pension fund is $1,135,334 in property taxes. The total funding amount in the budget per village actuary is $1,562,000. The debt included is per schedule, and the library is estimated. This shows a comparison of kind of a scorecard, a report card, I guess, as far as how the village compares with the other taxing bodies in the village. In 2010, the village represented 15.59% of the tax bill. In 2013, the village represented 14.74% of the tax bill. As far as the breakdown of the tax levy, basically this shows the most interesting feature here is, again, you'll see the subtotal change for general corporate section, where it shows for 2011 a 2.42% increase. That compares to the 1.5% PTEL limitation factor. 3.77% increase in 2012 compared to a 3% PTEL limitation factor. 2.26% increases in the extension on a 1.7% extension factor, and that again has to do with the village's estimate of new property and the loss in collection factor. The estimated again for 2014 will be a 2.58% increase based upon a 1.5% PTEL factor. The next slide shows what's happened in recent years with the assessed value. We're pretty much back at the same level that the village was at in 2004. 743 million, or billion there, or million for the in 2004 versus 787 million. The last 4 years, the equalized assessed value has gone down. That's a concern, not so much in the ability of the village to levy taxes, because the EAV it really affects the rate, not the amount that the village can extend. But if the legislature said that in years where the EAV declines, we would be unable to increase taxes, that would have an impact on the village as far as being able to fund operations. Next slide. This shows a history of extensions. From 2004 through 2014 proposed tax levy, and what that levy represents as a percentage of the EAV. On average, it's 1.08%. The 2013 levy was 1.35% of the equalized assessed value of the village. Basically, taking the 2014 tax levy and showing, again, the history back to 2004, where basically the tax level is about the same as it was in 2009. The reason for the decline Next slide. Is related to the changing the debt service schedule. And what this shows is on that orange section on the top is the extension for debt service since 2002. The middle blue section is the levy for police pension. The little red sliver in there is the village used to levy for garbage as a separate purpose. Since basically 2009, the village rolled the garbage fund into the general fund because if it's levied as garbage, we can't use it for anything else but garbage. So we decided to levy it for general and then give to the garbage fund what's needed in order to fund, kind of a subsidy back, but it gives the village more financial flexibility with those levy dollars. And that's a quick snapshot of the tax levy. The ordinance will be presented to the board at the December board meeting for public hearing and consideration.
Any questions?
Hey Dave, I really like this graph as a way to think about debt. And so just one suggestion would be, as we talk about adding debt, just continuing this forward would be really instructive. Just because, again, if you change the term of it, you can affect the in-year payment, but you're making more opaque the total amount you're carrying. So I like this.
Our next order of business is that the board, a motion for the board to meet an executive session for the purpose of discussing acquisition of property under Open Meetings Act, Section 2C5. May I have a motion to do
So move.
Second?
Roll call.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon. Trustee Thomas.
Yes.